Hello and welcome to the Wolcott Stories podcast. I'm your moderator, Saigon Steve. On this special podcast episode, we'll talk with military personnel who were stationed in Vietnam and talk with them about their extraordinary experiences. This podcast is pre-recorded, but you're invited to participate on future podcasts by emailing your contact information to WolcottStories@gmail.com. That's WolcottStories@gmail.com. So let's get started with today's special guests. Our special guests today are Jan Scruggs and Ann Sherman Wolcott. Jan Scruggs conceived the idea of building a memorial to Vietnam veterans. He founded the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, which built the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. The wall, as it is known, is visited by over 5 million persons yearly. Ann Sherman Wolcott was national president of the American Gold Star Mothers. The American Gold Star Mothers organization provides support to mothers who have lost their sons and daughters, as well as aiding the soldiers who do come back. They partner with veteran groups and volunteer in military hospitals. Her son, Rex, was an 18-year-old corporal in the United States Army who was killed during a Viet Cong ambush just 4 months into his Vietnam tour. Here now is Jan Scruggs to begin the conversation. Jan?
Yes, hello. And let's talk about your son, Rex. I understand he was a guitar player and a very handsome young man. I've seen his pictures.
Yes. He was a very talented young man, very handsome, blonde, curly hair, blue eyes. Very good, a very, very good son. We moved around a lot because his father was regular Army. And he joined the Army and went through his basic training and wound up with the 75th Rangers, 75th Infantry Regiment. And his airborne group was the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And he was in the States a short time and volunteered for Vietnam. He was appointed out of several hundred to the NCO Academy, but he chose to go to Vietnam. He was in Vietnam only like 3 or 4 months until he was shot in the back 4 times by the Viet Cong. And I was at work when Light Colonel came in to my office and told me that my son had been killed in Vietnam. So that's how I heard, and I was escorted out of the building and taken home. And I remember the day that we took Rex to Dulles Airport to go to Vietnam. And my son Dana was like 15. And when we put Rex on the plane, I came out and he said, I know I'll never see my brother again. And he didn't. In fact, I don't think he even looked at him when he came back. He was killed November the 19th, 1969. And his body was lost. So we didn't get the body back until like the 4th of December. And we had the funeral at Fort Myer. I had to plan everything myself. So he's buried there in Arlington in Lot 36, 1313. And my father, who was in World War II, is buried next to him. You know, I knew nothing about the Gold Star Mothers. I worked with a lady by the name of Imogene Cupp, who passed away within the past year. And her son had been killed in Vietnam a couple of years earlier. And she had joined the Gold Star Mothers, the American Gold Star Mothers. And she talked me into joining. So in 1973, I joined the American Gold Star Mothers. Did a lot of traveling with the organization, helped a lot of veterans. In 2003, I was elected the national president. There had been many before me. So I was national president of the American Gold Star Mothers in 2003 and 2004.
During that time frame, I took you back to Vietnam, of all places. Tell us a little bit about your impression.
I was honored to have been invited to go to Vietnam. And I wasn't quite sure about it at first. But I'm so glad that I went, because I found that it was not Vietnam that made me sad. It was our government. The Vietnamese people were very good to me. We went for 12 days. Jan was extremely helpful. He had organized everything for us. I was the only Gold Star mother that went on that trip. There were some veterans that we knew and a few civilians who went along that had interests in Vietnam. And it was something that I shall always, always remember. It totally changed my mind about what was going on there. You know, it didn't change anything so far as my son dying there. It helped a lot of people to gain their freedom in a country that was absolutely wonderful in South Vietnam. And so far as the politics of all of it, I won't get into that. But Rex did what he believed in. His father was regular Army. The military was all that we knew. And he joined knowing that he could help somebody. And he died knowing that he was giving people freedom.
And the reason we have called you is that people need to hear the story of what you gave to the country, and you know, and we're going to tell that story on our little podcast here. And at this time, Saigon Steve has a couple questions for you.
A lot of people hear the term Gold Star Mothers, and they really don't know much about the Gold Star organization. Tell us about how it got started, and I think it got started back in 1928, and how did it become the Gold Star organization?
Well, Grace Darling Sabo was the lady who started the organization in 1928. It started in Washington, D.C., actually, with few members, and we still have our headquarters there in Washington, D.C. The American Gold Star Mothers for mothers who lost sons or daughters in a war or while on active duty. So even if it's a training situation or a different type of a situation, so long as they were on active duty, the parents became Gold Star parents. The mother was a Gold Star mother. And today, they use the term Gold Star family a lot. There is a Gold Star father organization, but you don't hear much about it since it's become family. But we do things to help those who did return. And it's very, very helpful to get to know as many veterans as possible. And I have certainly done that all over the world and still do to this day. And you help them in any way that you can, because so many veterans don't realize the possibilities and the benefits that they have. And I do a lot of reading when I can. I make it a point to get information for veterans who call me. And to this day, I still get a lot of requests for information and help. So the Gold Star mothers throughout the United States or the world, wherever they happen to live, this is what we do. We help veterans and their families. Not necessarily financially. We do have circumstances where we help them as much as we can financially, but we can help them spiritually. We can help them recover. We can share our thoughts and our experiences with them, and somehow it lifts them up and it makes us family. And I have so many veteran friends that visit me all the time. And I would do anything. If they needed a place to live, I have a big house. They could live with me. You know, I love the veterans. I love what they do for us. And that's why I'm a Gold Star mother. It not only helps me have good memories of my own son, but I can help those, not only those who served with him, but all of them. So that's what the Gold Star mothers are supposed to do.
And Wolcott, I want our listeners to know that Rex was awarded posthumously the Silver Star for gallantry in action, and that his fellow soldiers said that he went down fighting brave and patriotic.
Yes, sir.
In preparation for this podcast, I looked up the Gold Star on the internet. I looked up your name, looked up Rex, and I came across something that I would like to end this podcast with.
Okay.
And it's called The Final Roll Call. And it's written this way. We thought of you with love today, but that is nothing new. We thought about you yesterday and days before that too. We think of you in silence. We often speak your name. Now all we have are memories and your picture in a frame. Your memory is our keepsake, with which we'll never part. God has you in his keeping. We have you in our heart. And Sherman Wolcott, we thank you for everything you've done.
And I thank you and Jan.
Well, that wraps up another special episode of Wolcott Stories. If you'd like to participate in a future Wolcott Stories podcast, email your contact information to wolcottstories@gmail.com. That's wolcottstories@gmail.com. Until next time, thanks for listening to the Wolcott Stories podcast. I'm Saigon Steve.